Elvis Presley's concerts in the years 1956 and 1957 were unforgettable experiences, not just for the music but for the audience's reaction, particularly that of young female fans. The atmosphere was electrifying to the point that the deafening screams of young girls drowned out the sound of Elvis's singing and the instruments. The musicians who shared the stage with Elvis had their own challenges in this chaotic environment. They couldn't hear the music or each other due to the overwhelming screams. Scotty Moore, a member of Elvis's band, humorously commented that they were the first band to be directed by an ass, referring to the fact that they had to watch Elvis's movements to know when to play. Elvis himself faced the unique challenge of singing in a venue where he couldn't even hear his own voice because of the noise. To manage this, Elvis often had to cover his ears with his hands to tune into his own singing amidst the screams. It's important to note that this phenomenon was quite novel for the time. This level of hysteria wasn't the norm at concerts during that era. While the excitement surrounding Frank Sinatra was certainly high, it didn't elicit the uncontrolled, frenetic response from female fans that Elvis did. Sinatra had his share of admirers, and some even fainted at his shows, but they didn't exhibit the continuous, ear-piercing screams that characterized Elvis's concerts. The sheer intensity and unfiltered emotional outpouring from fans at Elvis's shows puzzled adults and left many of them unnerved. The remarkable frenzy baffled most people, including parents, critics, and sociologists alike. Unlike today, where screaming fans are commonplace at concerts, the passionate outbursts at Elvis's shows stood out as an extraordinary spectacle during that time. The public, struggling to understand this new form of adulation, turned to various experts for explanations. A piece in the New York Daily Mirror on September 28, 1956, delved deep into this mystery, consulting psychologists and social workers for answers. The title of the article was quite telling: Girls Identify Elvis as Lover. The journalists, Norman Miller and James McGlinchey, concluded from their conversations with experts that teenage girls watching Elvis were thinking primarily about sex. According to the experts cited in the article, whether the girls admitted it or not, the sexual undertone was there. Even though many of these young women were good girls by societal standards, Elvis's presence allowed them a form of emotional release they wouldn't allow themselves otherwise. One psychiatrist, whose name wasn't mentioned in the article, observed the girls' faces during concerts and concluded that they were in a state of ecstasy. The facial twitches and other uncontrolled movements displayed by the girls were read as signs of experiency. The psychiatrist further explained that the overwhelming emotional response wasn't limited to just teenage girls, but also extended to working women in the business world. These women felt stifled in a male-dominated professional landscape and sought a reprieve from their repressed desires. Elvis, with his magnetic persona, provided a sanctuary for these businesswomen to reconnect with their feminine selves. It was like a brief escape into a world where they could express their emotional and romantic sides without any strings attached or risks involved. According to this psychiatrist, listening to Elvis offered these women a momentary freedom and a return to their natural femaleness. The next day, these women could revert back to their professional roles without any lingering emotional commitments, as would be the case with an actual romantic affair. A different psychologist provided another angle for understanding this Elvis-induced frenzy, describing him as a manifestation of primitive man. Everything about Elvis, his style, moves, and the genre of music he performed, was said to tap into raw, primitive instincts. The psychologist opined that if you took Elvis out of his iconic attire and stopped his characteristic body movements, he would lose the magnetic pull that made him unique. His theory was simple: Elvis in a conventional Brooks Brothers suit, singing a ballad without his signature moves, would likely fade into obscurity as just another entertainer. Further contrasting Elvis with other artists, the psychologist stated that previous music idols had evoked different, softer emotions. For example, Rudy Vallee was viewed as a young, handsome man who older women wanted to take care of, almost a motherly instinct. Frank Sinatra seemed to invoke a different kind of maternal instinct, making women want to nurture him, perhaps by offering him a hearty meal. Johnny Ray's appeal remained something of an enigma, but the emotional attachment his fans felt was also sweet and less intense than that for Elvis. But when it came to the king of rock and roll, there was a marked absence of such sweetness. It was raw, untamed emotional and sexual energy. The psychologist emphasized that young girls who were fans of Elvis couldn't articulate their feelings well. They would say things like, "He's gone," or "He's the greatest." According to him, these statements were expressions of the girls themselves experiencing a form of emotional awakening. This was a tumultuous period in their lives when they were coming to grips with their identities as young women. The psychologists speculated that many of these fans were navigating the confusing, yet exciting, transition from adolescence to womanhood. This transitional phase was full of mysterious feelings and emotions, and Elvis, with his raw energy, seemed to resonate with that internal turbulence. After the provocative article was published, it didn't take long for the targeted audience, young female Elvis fans, to voice their opinions. Feeling misunderstood and scrutinized, some of them took to the letters to the editor section of the New York Daily Mirror to express their views. Among these fans, Vivian Barnesworth penned a sarcastic letter embracing the article's conclusion, but with a sense of irony. She played along with the notion that Elvis represented sex, proclaiming that his songs indeed sent shivers down her spine. "Oh, sweet daddy, sing to me, Elvis, sing to me." Vivian mockingly echoed the sentiments articulated by the experts. Bertha Millerman also chimed in with her perspective, equally laced with sarcasm, admitting that the article had opened her eyes to her iniquity. In a tongue-in-cheek manner, she lamented, "Oh, sex, begone. Elvis, why have you done this to me?" as if to mock the overly analytical tone of the original article. These reactions underscored the sentiment among fans that the experts had perhaps oversimplified their genuine affection and enthusiasm for Elvis. The girls felt their experiences were more nuanced and couldn't be reduced to just being about sex, as the specialists had concluded. They expressed a sense of betrayal and annoyance that their emotional complexities had been boiled down to a single-word explanation by people who didn't really understand them. While the article intended to provide insights into the craze surrounding Elvis, it inadvertently touched a nerve with the very people it tried to understand. In doing so, the article also opened up a public dialogue about fandom, female sexuality, and the ethics of using psychological expertise to generalize experiences. For some of the fans, the spectacle of an Elvis concert was a once-in-a-lifetime experience that transcended simple explanations. The visceral feeling they got was not something they had ever felt before, and to have it reduced to a single concept felt like an affront. The public debate around the article also drew attention to the generational gap of understanding between adults and teenagers. It became evident that while experts could try to analyze the situation, the essence of what made Elvis so captivating to young women was perhaps beyond the realm of academic explanation. In the wake of the article, discussions about the Elvis phenomenon spilled into other spheres, affecting cultural conversations and even influencing later studies on fandom and gender dynamics. Even though some fans felt wronged by the simplification, the discussions that followed allowed for a broader understanding of how popular culture impacts society. With each letter and public response, it became clearer that the phenomenon surrounding Elvis was multifaceted, involving a mix of social, emotional, and psychological factors. Whether the experts got it right or wrong, their analyses did serve as a catalyst for a more open discourse about fan behavior, sexuality, and the dynamics of popular culture. Years after the Elvis frenzy of the 50s, I had the chance to talk to women who were teenagers when they attended Elvis concerts in 1957. Surprisingly, most of these women acknowledged that they had screamed during the performances, though many couldn't articulate why. For a good number, the act of screaming seemed to be a collective phenomenon. When others screamed, they joined in. Yet, it was more than just succumbing to mob psychology. There was something almost indescribable about the whole experience. One woman, who had been 15 years old when she saw Elvis perform, gave a more introspective answer. When Elvis took the stage and started to dance and sing, she found herself yelling spontaneously. She recalled the sense of awe and excitement that flooded over her, likening the emotion to feelings she experienced later in life during significant milestones. Reflecting on the moment, she admitted that the sensation felt akin to a sexual experience in terms of its intensity and impact. "It went through your body kind of like that," she said, articulating the almost electric charge she felt during the concert. In her view, Elvis had the ability to channel the essence of raw, human emotion through his music and performance. Her mother was no longer around to question her candidness, so she felt free to openly share that intimate experience of her youth. Her reflection served as a poignant confirmation of some of the theories put forth years earlier, yet it also offered a more nuanced understanding. For her, and likely many others, the emotions stirred by Elvis went beyond simple categorizations. They touched something foundational in the human experience. Whether you called it sexual or not, it was undoubtedly an experience that made her and others feel intensely alive. She said, "We're all getting something out of our system, and no one's getting hurt," echoing a sentiment that Elvis himself once expressed. It seems that what Elvis gave people was an opportunity to express unspoken emotions and untapped energies in a way that was both liberating and safe. It was an experience that allowed people to explore the boundaries of their feelings, often for the first time in their lives. Elvis was more than just a singer. He was a conduit for the complex swirl of emotions that make us human. This woman's candid retrospective underscored the point that the emotions elicited by Elvis were multi-layered and couldn't be easily classified. She, like many other fans, became a testament to the enduring, indescribable magic that Elvis Presley had, and still has, over his audience. Reflecting on the cultural whirlwind that was Elvis Presley in the 50s, it's apparent that he tapped into something deep and powerful. While researchers, psychologists, and journalists tried to explain the phenomenon, the mystery remained largely intact. Despite the many theories and explanations that have been offered, Elvis's unique appeal transcended simple categorization. What started as a curiosity in the 1950s continued to be a subject of fascination, study, and, yes, some level of misunderstanding even years later. The women who were once young fans grew older, but the memories of those electric moments stayed fresh in their minds. Many of them now realize that their experiences at Elvis concerts were not just youthful escapades but transformative moments in their lives. The screaming wasn't just noise, it was an expression of a collective emotional release, an act of liberation. Elvis himself recognized this, saying, "We're all getting something out of our system, and no one's getting hurt." In essence, the Elvis phenomenon served as a lens through which society could examine broader questions about youth culture, gender, and human psychology. With every hip thrust and note sung, Elvis was challenging the norms and expectations of his time, setting the stage for future social and cultural changes. The impact of his influence reached far beyond music and stage performance, leaving an indelible mark on society that still reverberates today. As adults tried to dissect and understand it, the youth just lived it, experiencing a freedom and vibrancy that was new and exciting. This is perhaps why the magic of Elvis has endured. It remains a symbol of a time when people felt the stirrings of change and the promise of something new. Whether the experts got it wrong or right is less important than the fact that Elvis managed to captivate an entire generation and beyond. There was a universal aspect to the Elvis experience, a common thread of emotion and energy that people from different walks of life could relate to. So, was it all about sex, as some early experts claimed? Well, maybe for some, but that seems to be too narrow an interpretation. What Elvis gave to people was not just a musical experience, but a glimpse into a broader spectrum of human emotion and experience. It seems that whether you were a screaming fan, a confused parent, or a scrutinizing expert, you couldn't escape the pull of the Elvis phenomenon. Even today, as we look back on the Elvis era, its significance seems to lie not just in the man himself, but in what he revealed about us, as individuals and as a society. The king may have left the building long ago, but the echoes of his influence continue to resonate, leaving us with the eternal question: what was it about Elvis that made him so unforgettable?